Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. I am here back with a Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. Before I get into tonight's video, I should say, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who's stuck around. Thank you everybody for the support and the concern. We had a very serious family emergency happen. For those who know, you know I'm not going to get into what that was here. I do want to give a very, very special thank you to my buddies Patrick McCray and Alan Gallant for holding down the fort here on this channel, providing some content. They recorded it, I uploaded it, but I do want to thank them from the bottom of my heart. They are very, very wonderful people. But I'm going to get on with this video here. You know, the portrait of Quentin Collins. But I'm not just going to get into the portrait. I think it's important to get into the character in question himself. Quentin was introduced as a ghost in episode 646. Now, was that Quentin's ghost? You know, my buddy Patrick McCray has a very interesting theory on this. And for those who don't know what that theory is, well, that theory is that the ghost of Quentin actually isn't Quentin, but perhaps Judah Zachary. And it's a very interesting theory. Is there tidbits of proof to this? In a sense, there is. Now, what I mean by this is, and I want to be clear, I'm not necessarily confirming Patrick's theory by doing this, but this is in the course of the show if you're paying attention to it. Quentin's ghost is not the first ghost you meet. Everyone knows this. It's Josette's. Technically. We don't ever really find out who the ghost in the drawing room was. Was it Josette's? Wasn't it? Who knows? But the literal ghost you see come out the portrait is Josette's. She's our first major interaction. And then you see the ghost of Bill Malloy. And Bill Malloy's ghost does talk. He sings. He warns Vicky, leave here before you get killed. His appearance comes with threat, more so warnings to Vicky. Basically the widows, along with Josette, along with Bill, doing Matthew Morgan. So you do see vengeful ghost on here on this show. But that was a person who did something very wrong, Matthew Morgan. The ghost of Josette more helps the Collins family. In fact, she helps Victoria Winters. That's sort of your hint that Vicky may or may not be a Collins. I'll leave that for you to decide, because I'm not really here to talk Vicky. And Josette's, what I mean by, ghosts and the difference between them in a sense is, okay, when you meet Josette's ghost and you see how helpful she is to the Collins family, how she does everything to help them, not just Vicky, but does everything she can to protect them. This is a very friendly ghost. This is somebody who will help the family, or helps somebody who's trying to help the family, at least to the best of their ability, as a spectral ghost. And when you meet Josette as a fictional person, where it's Catherine Lee Scott playing her in 1795 storyline, you meet a character who very much resembles the ghost. Very friendly, very classy. I mean, there's this, and that's how I would describe Josette's ghost too. Very classy. Whereas when you meet Sarah Collins, Sarah Collins is this little girl who is the sister of Barnabas Collins. She she wants a kid her own age to play with her, which is one of the reasons she becomes friends with David. She knows she's a ghost. She knows she's dead. Um, she is here because basically she's been tagged in by Josette, if you will, in a sense, that and the writers needed another ghost. Because basically Barnabas was not going to listen to Josette, so who does Josette tag in? Sarah. And I would say when you meet Sarah, the little girl, in 1795, she very much fits her ghost. I would say with Quentin, that's not the case. And I do want to stress, yes, that's my opinion, but you can also go look at this yourself and tell there's just something really different about the man Quentin Collins and the ghost that has been presented to you. And you could say, well, can't there be a vengeful ghost? Sure, there can. And I'm not saying there can't. We've most certainly seen vengeful ghosts in Dark Shadows for the good. Now, and I'm not saying you can't see that for the bad, but I would also very much like to say if the ghost is bad, then the person in question needs to be rotten to the core. And though Quentin can be rotten and he has his way with women, he's not that evil. I mean, he's not that level to what the ghost was. Nowhere near. And that's really one of the biggest issues, too, when you're getting into Quentin the Man. Let me make sure I got the numbers right here. When you meet when you meet the man Quentin Collins in episode 701, he's very charming. He's very flirtatious with women. In fact, Quentin himself, when he's talking to Beth, he goes, "Why didn't you leave with your mistress, Jenny Collins?" Which is Quentin's wife. So he's not even asking, "Hey, is my wife?" He's not even asking, "How's my wife?" He's saying, "Why didn't you leave with your mistress?" He's under the belief that Jenny Collins left. Again, there's a lot of tap dancing around that. But you also see him grab Beth by the arm and sort of has her arm behind her back. Keep in mind, this is not the first time we've seen servants treated like servants. Ben was very much talked about being treated a certain way by Joshua, and Joshua treated everybody that way. Simple enough for me to say, right? But so we've seen servants sort of be treated that in the past. Look at Willie and Barnabas. Barnabas beat Willie like a servant. So servant abuse is nothing new. It's all about class, like my buddy Patrick McRae has said before. Again, just huge shout outs to Patrick and Alan. Again, I owe those guys a huge gratitude that I could never repay. Just thank you to them very, very much. But with Quentin, you see all this charm in just one scene. And sure, he's out for money. Sure, he's a bit of a scoundrel. But he's not quite evil enough. And, many people are going to point out to a lot of things, and I will point them out too. Yes, he's obsessed with the occult. So, but I think that's the writers too, just giving the character a bit of backdrop, more so than dropping a suggestion. It doesn't feel like a suggestion, because here's the thing. He wouldn't be the first Collins to be interested in the occult. Hell, we've heard, not that Barnabas would be either, I don't think, but we hear Barnabas has had a fascination with tarot cards and other things. So it's nothing new to the Collins family to be obsessed with things they don't quite understand. Also, too, and I want to be clear about this. I'm not saying that it would be impossible for that to be Quentin's ghost, but it's pretty improbable. I don't consider it a huge possibility that the man we see in episode 71 is the same ghost we see in episode 646. It does not appear to be the same person. When I say appear, I don't mean by look. Yes, they look the same, but act the same. And you could say, well, he's dead. There's no... I don't want to say there's no charm. He does trick the children. And Quentin does have a way with Jameson. But it's not the same level as the ghost, in my opinion. The ghost is very more being manipulative than being kind to Jameson. There's a difference between manipulation and being kind to a child. And I just don't ever really see that in Quentin's ghost. Quentin's ghost. But I do see that in the Quentin we meet in 701. And I see, when I say David Selby's character, Quentin had his way with women, look, I don't know who had more women, Quentin or James Bond. And I'm being serious here. Quentin Collins had every woman outside of my wife was obsessed with Quentin, even Beth. Again, he's a handsome dude. Jenny Collins was his wife. Here's a guy who went off with his brother's wife to Alexander. He left with Laura Collins. Then Amanda, who's what's her name? Amanda Harris, who's brought to life by Charles Delaware Tate, becomes obsessed with Quentin. It's like every woman you meet is fed to Quentin Collins because women can't resist this dude. It's like, really? Really? So, I hope that sort of clears up the ghost part of this. To the portrait itself. Now, is this story taken... what's the guy's name? From, I'm going to kick myself now. God, I'm tongue-tied. I can see the face, but I can't think of the name. Anyway, there's a story that there's this guy whose portrait is painted by his friend, and the guy sells his soul to be immortal. His portrait ages, but he doesn't. There's a couple... He sells his soul, basically, he agrees with the devil, basically. Sell his soul. His portrait will age, and he doesn't. Now, here's some issues with this. And I want to say, I'm not trying to nitpick these issues, but they are there within the frame of the story. Charles Tate, who debuts in episode 804, that's 804, is not necessarily friends with Quentin Collins, nor do the two ever become friends. They're not best friends, they're not close acquaintances, and it's pretty much because Charles Delaware Tate isn't a woman. Yes, I went there. Charles Delaware Tate, you were told, and again, this is going to get into Petofe too. I'll get to that here in a moment. I'll bring up the episode number for Tate again because it's important when you're discussing Petofe here. Charles Delaware Tate, who talks to Quentin Collins, he's been sitting in the drawing room sketching Quentin. And he shows Quentin the sketch, and yes, by this time, Quentin is, in fact, a werewolf. So, Quentin looks at the sketch, he goes, you want to paint my portrait? And, he's more asking him. He goes, well, I don't want my portrait painted. And Charles Delaware Tate goes, but I've been commissioned. Well, who were you commissioned by? And he shows him, he, being Charles Delaware Tate, shows Quentin a letter. Quentin does look at it and read it, and he says, "I was commissioned by your Aunt Edith, by your grandmother Edith." And here's the thing of this: Quentin doesn't look at Charles Delaware Tate and say baloney. He doesn't say BS. He doesn't say, "Oh, that's not her handwriting." He just looks at it and says, "Well, I don't really want my painted portrait." So Quentin himself has no real interest in having his portrait painted, and that the committee, because in Charles Delaware Tate's words, it's already been commissioned, meaning it's already been paid for. What Charles Delaware Tate isn't, and is Charles Delaware Tate lying, you might ask? The simple answer is yes. But before I get into that, be clear here. Quentin has not made a deal with anybody to have this portrait painted of him. He really hasn't. He hasn't made a bargain with Patofe. He hasn't struck up a deal. He hasn't done really any of that. So there is sort of this no deal being made with the devil. Now, does Quentin try to contact the devil? Sure, but it doesn't go well. It doesn't work. And this is, by the way, that episode in question I'm talking about, that's the writers having some fun, because Dark Shadows did get their hand smacked for going down into hell, which is just ridiculous. Censors. Ridiculous. It's hell. It's okay. We're used to it. It's okay if we see the devil, right? So, I said, is Charles Delaware Tate lying? Yes. Edith did not commission him to do shit. The person who commissioned him, who debuts in episode, 793, Victor Ben Givens, aka Count Andreas Patofe. Patofe is an evil mage who uses aliases and composes other people. He has very powerful powers. He can manipulate people very easily. Even without the hand, even without his powerful hand, he is still very powerful. He does not need the hand to be powerful. He needs the hand to live. Because if he doesn't get the hand back soon, he's going to die. So there's that, the severed hand of Count Andreas Patofe. And you might say, why is it severed? Well, that's a great question. You see, Count Patofe was at war with these gypsies, and these gypsies, were getting killed. So they decide to curse Count Patofe to be a werewolf. Well, Count Patofe had a unicorn, which he killed when he turned into a werewolf. It broke his heart, if he ever had one, and which he did. And finally, he makes a deal. Please take this curse off me. Okay, we will take said curse off you if we can take your hand, which had its own powers. It's amazing how this guy had so much power, and it's just crazy. It's a hell of a story, though, and they do take his hand and keep it. If he doesn't get back within so many years, I think 100, if I'm not mistaken, he dies. So, that being said, Patofe, who, even before episode 804 happens, it's actually in episode, I think, 794, that Patofe discovers Quentin is the werewolf, because he changes in 793 when there's a whole dispute about the hand. Basically, when Gibbons arrives, Aristide has the hand. Angelique tricks him and gets it off of him. Uses a voodoo doll, has a scarf around her neck and his neck, and chokes it. And he actually prevents the werewolf from attacking him. He's very calm with the beast. It's because he knows the beast. It's because he was the beast. Now, I don't remember them saying how long Patofe was a werewolf. So I would take it was long enough that he had an understanding of the werewolf itself, which is that one of the reasons he could sort of somewhat control the werewolf? I just think he's that powerful of a mage. He can do almost anything, um, which covers a lot of bases. When you have powers, when you have extreme magical powers. Because remember, Quentin's face is deformed from the hand. I know he is not the only person who was deformed by the hand. Evan Hanley's face was deformed by the hand. Oh my God! The deformities of Dark Shadows, the deformed faces of Dark Shadows, ladies and gentlemen, all caused by the hand of Patofe. Well, not all, unless you're Josette and it was caused by Josette. My gosh. Um, Again, to be clear, Quentin is still a werewolf when the portrait is painted. So, Patofe captures him. He wants the hand, or kill Quentin. Eventually, Patofe gets the hand back. Now, Tate at episode 804, because keep in mind, Patofe has disappeared seemingly. Air quotes. He's not really gone. He's around. He's just meditating, and he's possessed Jameson. He's turned Edward into a butler. He's turned Trask's daughter into a psychic named Pansy Faye. It's all sorts of craziness, and it's fun. But eventually, Patofe does get the hand back. So here's what happens. Charles Delaware Tate does paint the portrait of Quentin Collins. Somehow, I think Patofe, if I'm not mistaken, touches the portrait or something to that effect. I forget which. And somehow, the soul of the werewolf and somewhat of Quentin is in Quentin's portrait, meaning Quentin doesn't change into the werewolf, the portrait does. But if the portrait were ever destroyed, Quentin would change into the werewolf. Now, here's where this gets weird. It wasn't weird enough for you already. So, Quentin Collins, who can't age, obviously, because, hey, he's a werewolf, but he doesn't change into one. So, as the years go on, the next time we see this portrait after 1897 or 1898, whatever, this portrait is very old. Quentin's portrait is not a werewolf anymore. It is old. And no, Quentin has not changed into the werewolf ever since the portrait was painted and finished. Tate tries to paint one for Chris, but it doesn't work. Chris Jennings, Quentin's descendant. It doesn't work. Now, there's a lot of questions I have here. And I don't know if I'll give good answers here, but I'll try. So what happens here? How does a portrait somehow cure Quentin? I'm not so sure it does. I'm sort of wondering if the gypsies just let the curse go. Just somehow just cured it. Now, they said they needed the hand of Patofe. Here's the thing. They could have been lying. I mean, I'm not saying they were. Would it shock you if they were? I mean, yeah, I get the writers right in that they need the hand of Patofe to cure the werewolf curse. Did they really? They didn't need it to put it on. So that's all I'll say. It's again, It's very strange. Could it have been Patofe? Yeah, it could have been. Patofe is still alive somewhere in the present day in 1970, or sorry, 1969. But at that time, so again, we never find his body. They find his glasses. My only thing is, if he cures it, why doesn't he just hold on to it? Maybe because he knew that Barnabas and Julia would look for it, or Barnabas would look for it. Who knows? That could all be a possibility. I'm not saying that's what happened, but those are some possibilities. My more roundabout way of why this curse Quentin isn't the werewolf anymore has to do more with Chris than anything. Chris is a descendant, and I do think the reason Quentin doesn't become the werewolf anymore in the present is because Chris is the werewolf. Eventually, it just passes to the next of kin when the initial werewolf either A, dies off, or B, is cured. Or if they're cured, it doesn't get passed down, but if they die off or something. Again, it's all crazy. I don't know how they're... Because the writer's explanation to the portrait, my explanation is if he stabs the portrait here in the present day in 1969 it is, or 1970, and keep in mind in 1995 he almost destroys his own portrait, he would have died. He'd have just died of old age. That I agree with extremely, because he would not have become a werewolf. The portrait wasn't a werewolf anymore. It was a man. It was what was left. So that's my best explanation of the portrait of Quentin Collins. It is one of the craziest things ever. It's a hell of a story, though, too. Because, again, Chris does not get cured by portrait. Though Charles Delaware Tate has sort of lost his magic with age, I don't know if Patofe took it away or didn't. So, does Tate know Patofe is around? I want to put it past him, but I don't know either. I don't know if he does or doesn't. It's never really answered to me. And I wouldn't trust Tate if he said no. Tate has lied many times. That's the best thing about a lot of these characters. They tell some of the most bold-faced lies, and you want to give them benefit of the doubt because there is a shred of honesty within them. It's just Dark Shadows is a hell of a show. You should go watch it right now after you watch this. So I hope you've enjoyed this explanation. I hope I gave a good one. I don't know if I did or didn't for this video. Again, I want to give some huge shout-outs to my buddies Patrick McRae and my buddy Alan Gallant. Thank you guys so very, very, very much. It has been crazy these past couple weeks, but I'll try to be back a lot more. I'll try to get... I do have a video tomorrow night with Patrick and Alan. I'm really excited to do it. We're doing the original Ocean's 11. So, you guys have a good night. Take care. Peace.